Alrighty, welcome to Unit 2. This means you have successfully completed the first unit of Grade 11 College Math. Before you get started on quadratic relations, we need to go over a few things about graphing. Feel free to stop this video at any time and do the questions that are assigned at the bottom of each review part. So first, simplifying fractions, expressions, a little bit of algebra review. So we're going to talk about brackets and multiplying. So whenever you see brackets in an expression, you take off the brackets by multiplying everything in the brackets by the term outside. Then only the like terms, those are the ones with the same letters, get added and subtracted. So if I look at my first question, 5y plus bracket negative 8y bracket, we cheat in math. We're a little bit lazy. Instead of writing down a 1 in front of that bracket, we don't write a 1. But that's what it really means. It's 5y plus 1 bracket negative 8y bracket. So when there's a bracket, you multiply what's in front of the bracket by what's inside the bracket. So in this question, I would have 1 times negative 8. And 1 times negative 8 is negative 8. Don't forget to write down your y. And then the like terms. Both of those terms have a y, so we're going to add or subtract the numbers in front and find out how many y's there are. So 5 take away 8 means I'd have negative 3y. And we're done. We got rid of the brackets and we added our like terms together or subtracted our like terms. When I look at B, there's my number in front, 3. I want to make sure I take everything in the bracket and multiply by the number in front. So I have 3 times 1a and 3 times negative 7. And 3 times 1a means I have 3a. And 3 times negative 7 means I have negative 21. And remember to write down your plus 12a. Before we're done, we got to look and see if there's any like terms. So I look for the same letter. 3 has an A, 21 doesn't, and 12 has an A. So I want to put the like terms together. Remember, the sign in front always stays with the number. So the sign in front tells us whether we're adding or subtracting. So in this case, because it's a plus sign in front of the 12, I'm going to add. So I have 3 A's plus 12 more A's means I have 15 A's altogether. And don't forget, the one that didn't have an A still has to be written down. All right, last one. I'm looking along this question, negative 6x squared plus 7x minus, and I see a bracket. And there again, we're too lazy to write down the number that should be in front of the bracket, which is a 1. So that means I'm going to have the number in front times both numbers in the bracket. Remember your sign in front. So I'm really multiplying by negative 1. So negative 1 times negative 8. The numbers in front, negative 6x squared plus 7x, nothing changes because they're not in brackets and they have nothing therefore to multiply by. So when I do negative 1 times negative 8, a negative times a negative makes a positive 8. And remember to write down your x squared. Nothing changes about the letters when you multiply the numbers in front. And when I multiply again, negative 1 times positive 4. Remember, the sign stays in front. So a negative times a positive is a negative 4. After I'm done multiplying, then I'm going to look for like terms. So I'm looking for the same letters, keeping the sign in front. Negative 6x squared is not the same as 7x. You must have both the same letter and the same exponent to be like terms. But 8x squared is the same as 6x squared because they both have an x and they're both squared. So I'm going to add these two together, but not the 7x because it's not the same. So I have negative 6x squared plus 8x means I'm going to have 2x squareds when I have negative 6 plus 8. Nothing to add with the 7x because that one doesn't have an x, so you can't put them together. So I have 7x and minus 4. Bring those both along, down for the ride, and you're done. If you want to stop the video now and try page 166, number 4, go right ahead. Our second review topic is substituting numbers, which you've already been doing a little bit in Unit 1. We just didn't call it that. Substituting numbers for variables happens when we put a number in where a variable was. Whenever you put a number in, make sure you put brackets around it. So if I look at my first example, y equals negative 5x squared, I want to put 2 instead of x. So when I put 2 instead of x, I put brackets around the 2, and everything else about the equation stays the same. I have negative 5, and I have the squared. And then we need to remember BEDMAS when we calculate. So brackets means any work inside the brackets, then exponents, then division, multiplication, the order they occur, and addition and subtraction, the order they occur. So when I look at this question, it has a bracket, but that bracket is there to tell me to multiply, not to do work inside of it. So I don't have any brackets to do. Second thing in BEDMAS is exponents. This question has an exponent. So I want to do my exponent next. That means I have 2 to the exponent 2, which is 2 times 2, 4. So I've done my exponent. And now the brackets are telling me to multiply, so division and multiplication means I'm going to do my multiplying next. I have an answer of negative 20. If I look at my second example, it's a little more complicated. Same idea. I'm going to take out the x, and I'm going to put in negative 8. And we're going to remember BEDMAS. This time, brackets. There is a calculation inside the bracket for me to do. So I'm going to do my brackets first. And the calculation is negative 8 plus 6, which is negative 2. Then I'm going to do my exponent. Negative 2 to the exponent 2 means negative 2 times negative 2, which is positive 4. And then I'm going to do my multiplying. Remember, we're too lazy to write that 1 down, but it really means negative 1 times 4. So I have negative 4. Okay, so if you want to stop now and do page 166, 5 to 7, AC and E only, feel free to do that. I'm going to go on with the next review. So third thing we need to look at is some graphing review. Tables of values and first differences, as well as another part of graphing we'll look at in a few minutes. So when you're given an equation, you can always make a graph of that equation by filling in a table of values. A table of values just comes from substituting a number in, like we were doing before with the algebra review. So if I have a negative 2, all it's asking me to do is take out x and put in negative 2. So I would have 2 times negative 2 minus 3. And then remembering BEDMAS, I calculate an answer. So I do my multiplying first. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. And then I subtract. Negative 4 take away 3 is negative 7. And as I fill in my table, each pair of numbers gives me a pair to put on the graph, which we'll talk about in a few minutes when we make the graph. So negative 1, I'm going to do the same thing. Instead of x, I'm going to put negative 1. And then I'll do BEDMAS. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Take away 3 is negative 5. And I keep doing that with my table. Put 0 in for x. Put 1 in for x and put 2 in for x. And I'm going to get a whole bunch of pairs that I can put on my graph. So when I go over to my graph, I got to remember the x-axis is the horizontal and the y-axis is the vertical. And I'm going to put a bit of a scale on. 1, 2, 3. I don't have to put all the numbers on, just a few so that everybody knows what the scale of the graph is. And then I'm going to put my points on. So each pair of numbers gives me a point. The first one being -2, -7. So I'm going over to -2. And then I'm going to go down to -7. And I'll put a point. And I don't have to draw the lines every time. I was just doing that so you could see what I was doing. And so -1, -5. I'm going over to -1 and I'm going down to -5. And 0 and -3. 0 is in the middle and down to -3. And 1 and -1. Positive 1, so that means I'm going to the right one and down to -1. And +2 and +1 to the right 2 and up 1. And once I have my points all drawn, I draw myself a lovely line through my points. And I'll adjust my line here a bit in a minute. Get that perfectly through my points. There we go. Tidy that up a bit. We want to have arrows on both ends of our lines. We'll make it just a little bit thinner. There we go. And there's our line. And that line came from the equation y equals 2x minus 3. So to generate a table of values means you have enough information to make a graph. You take each pair of numbers on the table and you put them on your graph to make a graph. Other thing we can do with a table is calculate first difference. And first difference just comes from subtracting the y values starting at the bottom. So I look at my y numbers and I'm going to subtract. 1 minus -1 equals 1 plus 1 actually, which is 2. And then I do the next two. -1 minus -3. -1 minus -3 is -1 plus 3, which is 2. And I do the next pair. And I do the last pair. And you should be noticing something. They're all the same. The first differences are always the same for a straight line graph. And a straight line graph we call a linear graph. So anytime your points line up and make a straight line, the first differences, the numbers you get when you subtract your y values starting at the bottom of the table, will always be the same. So if you want to stop now and work on page 166, 8, 9a, and 10, you can do that. The next review is slope and y-intercept of a line on a graph. So slope formula. Slope is the rise over the run from the graph. So it's how much the graph is going up and over. The rise over the run. Or from the equation of the line, you can get it from the number that is with x when y is all by itself. The y-intercept is the other important number that you can get from a graph. It's the number where the graph crosses the y-axis. Or from the equation, it's the other number, move this out of the way, in the equation when y is by itself. So let's take a look at an example of that. So if we have the equation we graphed before, y equals 2x minus 3, the y is by itself, so the slope of that line is 2, and the y-intercept is minus 3. keep the sign with the number. So that means the line crossed the graph at -3, and it went up 1 and over 1. So if we go back and look at our graph we just made, the line crossed the y-axis at 3. Maybe a different color would be good instead of blue. The line crossed the y-axis at -3. And if I look at the rise and the run, I'm rising 2 and I'm going over 1. So the slope equals a rise of 2 and a run of 1, which is 2, just like the equation had. Slope and y-intercept. If I haven't graphed it already, let's look at a different one. Graph the following relation by filling in the table. So let's practice graphing. If I put -2 in there, be careful when there's a negative x. So it's negative from the equation and another negative from the number, which is actually going to make the 2 positive. So I have 2 take away 8, -6. And I do the same with the -1. 1 take away 8, -7. And the next one, and I'm not sure why I have 2 zeros. We'll get rid of that. There we go. And the next one, -2, -10. Perfect. And then we're going to make our graph. Remember x, y, a little bit of a scale. Put some points on. -2, -6. There we go. And -1, -7. 0, -8. 1, -9. 2, -10. And we draw our line. Make sure when you're graphing a line that you use a ruler. I will mark it wrong if it's not drawn with a ruler. If it's a line, it should be straight, and it doesn't matter how good a drawer you think you are, I can tell the difference between a line drawn with a ruler and one drawn by hand. All right, so there's the equation we get, or the line we get from the equation, -x -8. So when I look at that equation, I can see from the equation what the slope is. The slope is a number with x, -1. I can also see from the equation what the y-intercept is. It's the other number, -8. And I can see those pieces of information on my graph as well. There's my y-intercept where it crosses the y-axis, -8. And my slope goes over 1 and down 1. Therefore, it's a negative. Over 1 and down 1. Therefore, it's -1. Rise over run. Because it's rising, -1. And it's running 1. So the slope is -1. So if we go a step further, if I've already given you the graph and you don't have an equation this time, I want to figure out the slope and the y-intercept. The y-intercept is the easiest part. For the y-intercept, all you do is look at the y-axis and see what number the line crosses at. So for my blue line, there's my y-intercept right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the y-intercept for the blue line is 8. For the red line, there's the y-intercept right there. The y-intercept for the red line is 1. Crosses the y-axis at 1. The slope is a little more difficult. The slope, you want to draw what we call a rate triangle. And you've seen me do it in the previous graphs. A rate triangle just joins 2 points on the grid. Don't draw your rate triangle between the grid. So if I look at my blue line and I want to draw my rate triangle, I can make it as big or as small as I want it, but I want to make sure I join points on the grid where it crosses the grid. So there's I'm rising, and there I'm running. So my rise and my run. Once I draw my rate triangle, I read the rise and the run using the scale. So in this case, my scale is 1. So from this point here to this point here, I have risen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I do my run. From this point here to this point here, I have run 3. And then I use my formula. The formula slope is rise over run. So for my blue line, the rise is 6 and the run is 3. So rise over run is 6 over 3, and 6 over 3 is 2. So I have a slope of 2 for my blue line. For my red line, I want to draw my rate triangle. Well, this time I'm going down and across. There's my rise, there's my run. So when you go down, you know your slope is negative. So my rise is -1 and my run is 3. So slope is rise over run, which is -1 over 3 for the red line. And that should keep you guys busy for a little while. There's a few more questions about graphing review. If you haven't stopped and done the questions along the way, then you need to go back and start the algebra review and complete all of that before you go on with lesson 2. Good luck.